Hello, friends. We're back with episode 189 of the Our Weekly Highlights podcast. This is the weekly show where we talk about the terrific highlights that are shared on this week's Our Weekly issue. My name is Eric Nance, and yes, we are now getting towards the middle of December, and it is the season of giving in many parts of the world. And of course, over the weekend, my kiddo was nice and gave to his entire family a nice little nasty cold that I'm just recovering from. Hopefully the voice is up to snuff for this episode. But yes, I am here. But luckily, I'm not here alone this time because fresh from his travels across the country is my awesome co-host, Mike Thomas. Mike, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Eric. Yes, I was in Kansas last week, but I clicked my heels 3 times. I'm back in Connecticut today and excited to be back on the mic with you.
And luckily, no wicked witches delaying your flights or anything, so that's terrific.
Not this time, thank goodness.
Yes, it is a busy travel season, so we're always consider ourselves lucky when things go smoothly. And honestly, we are also very lucky that we have, in my opinion, a fantastic issue. And I'm not just saying that because, check notes here. Oh, yeah, it was me curating it this time. And no, this is awesome because I have all of you in the community to thank for your awesome resources. I was able to merged into this issue, and I dare say I think this was an even smoother process than the last time I curated it, and we had some nice pull requests that I merged in and a lot of content that we can talk about, but we'll be focused on the highlights this time around. But of course, since this will be the last issue I curate in 2024, just want to do a dramatic pause there for effect. I definitely want to thank the rest of the team throughout the year. It's been terrific fun to work with you all, and I'm looking forward to having more great adventures of Our Weekly in 2025. But without further ado, let's get right to it. And we are talking about now for our first highlight, a very key piece in the world of the R ecosystem, in particular with package repositories, that has had already a wonderful effect on many parts of the R community. And with this recent news that we're about to share, we think there's even bigger things to come for this project. What are we speaking about? This is the R Universe project that has been led by R OpenSci and their chief engineer, Jeroen Ooms, who has shared with us, and along with the R Consortium blog, that the R Universe has been named the newest top-level project under the R Consortium umbrella. Your first question probably is, what does a top-level project actually mean here, other than sounding really important? Well, and technically speaking, in the blog post, it is a particular project that was now going to get 3 years of funding from the R Consortium. And this is a recognition of this being recognized along with other projects that are currently designated top level, which include DBI, the database, common interface that many of the R packages involving with databases utilize as a key dependency, the R Ladies initiative, and the R User Group Support Program, or the RUGS program, helping to bring, infrastructure around having all sorts of R-type meetups and community resources. R OpenSci's R Universe is now joining that effort. And there's a great quote from the executive director of the R Consortium, Terry Christiani. She says, and I quote, "The ability to find and evaluate high-quality R packages is important to the R community, and the R Consortium is pleased to support the R Universe project with a long-term commitment to help strengthen the foundation of the R package ecosystem. We are pleased to be working more closely together with R OpenSci on this effort." And there's also a great quote from the new executive director of R OpenSci, Noam Ross. He also touches on, the importance of R Universe and their excitement to work with the R Consortium to strengthen the infrastructure even more. And we'll also have linked in the show notes the you might say the companion blog post to this from R OpenSci directly, from Noam Ross and Jeroen, who co-authored it. It highlights another point that I do want to emphasize, is that R Universe, yes, on its own, is already bringing this revolution of a package repository that's powered by a lot of DevOps principles, a lot of automation, and very, very intricate infrastructure to help you as a package author give your users a way to have not just a source of a package available, but binaries that are compiled, and more recently, even WebAssembly compliant version of your package. That's a huge win right there. But our universe is now serving as the foundation of newer efforts in the R package management ecosystems. There is a new effort, and I must stress it's early days, but there is some excitement around the R multiverse project, I should say. This is being headed by a team of people, including Will Landau, the author of Targets, and this is building upon our universe's infrastructure on their automation, their compilation of binaries, to help bring a transparent kind of governance that combines with our universe's infrastructure for another type of package repository. Certainly, industries are paying a very close attention to this. It is early days, but it just goes to show that the R Universe platform could be used for more things than just our universe itself. And that's what we're probably going to see in 2025 and beyond. So I'm thrilled to see this, more, you'd say, rigorous or this more robust backing of the project. We know that times can be tough financially for certain vendors. So the fact that now our OpenSci can count on this additional funding for this particular project, I think it's going to be a huge win for Yaron and the rest of the R OpenSci team as they make our universe even more of an awesome platform for new and older package authors alike in the R ecosystem.
Yeah, Eric. One thing that I will say is a quick call to action as you get toward the end of the year, and this isn't to toot my organization's own horn or anything like that, but we donate every year as a charitable contribution to the R Consortium and to our OpenSci. If you work at a company, and I think that it would make sense, and you use R there and it benefits your company, I think it would make a whole lot of sense to ask them to do the same thing. This is the season of a lot of corporate charitable donations, so it might be an easy yes, and I think it's certainly worth asking the question, considering how much some of these projects have given back to a lot of us. Our universe is incredible. If we think about what we sort of had to do before our universe, there was really no searchable way to figure out what sort of packages are on CRAN. I mean, you can do it through, I think, some of the API tools that'll give you a list of all of the packages on CRAN right in your console. And then you could do some filtering, but there's no interactive GUI, very visual, with hyperlinks to all of the vignettes, with a hyperlink to the GitHub repository, with graphs that show when the most recent contributions were and who the contributors were. It's just this fantastic visual medium to be able to take a look at all of the different R packages that are out there, that at least have been picked up by the R Universe project. And the scale of it still blows me away. This whole infrastructure that Yaron and others has created it's mind blowing. That the amount of automation that's involved here. The way that packages are being built as binaries instead of users needing to install from GitHub and actually build that package themselves. It's absolutely incredible. And to think that there's a multiverse project out there and more coming on top of this is really, really exciting to hear. A question for you: Does multiverse mean multilingual, or are we still just talking R?
It is still focused on R, but I actually don't have the full genesis on how the name came to be, but I think it is trying to bridge, as I said earlier, these concepts that can be derived from certain aspects of, say, CRAN versus certain aspects of our universe, and we're blending them together in a way that kind of takes the best of both worlds, as I say. And again, this is all very early days. You'll hear more about this in 2025, but it is taking the best of additional frameworks here, and certainly our universe. Without our universe, a concept like our multiverse is simply not possible, because can you imagine, Mike, you and I, even if we had a lot of funding spinning this up on our own, like the amount of engineering it takes to build this, in a way that now, like I said, can be built upon with its API infrastructure, with its automation, whether it's powered by GitHub Actions or other slick services. Just the amount of attention to detail that's been laid here. Yeah, we are very thankful that this exists at all.
Yeah, I can't imagine how much the government would have paid a Big Four consultant to put together a project like this. I think what Yaron has done in government dollars is probably millions, but
sure looks that way when you look at the UI, doesn't it? Because everything is so polished, and I'm even looking at, you can have, we often say in the R community, we have these, verses of packages, such as, of course, the tidyverse, and in my industry, a suite of packages called the Pharmaverse. I have an entry to the Pharmaverse right on this page, and when I click it, I immediately see all the packages inside that. It is very searchable, very, like I say, you can put an API in front of this should you wish. There's so many different ways to get to the interesting parts of a package, including the documentation, which is rendered on the spot in this platform. It is absolutely, the attention to detail cannot be understated. So I expect there's going to be more really big things coming to this platform that, again, our universe itself will be a front runner to this. And then other projects like Multiverse are going to hugely benefit from this too.
This is so stinking cool. I'm looking at the Pharmaverse sort of landing page in the R universe, underneath our universe, and it's really, really cool. The visuals that we have access to, just the amount of automation and ease of use for working with our tooling and our packages out there, and the way that things are really beautifully organized and documented here is fantastic. And I guess just to go back to an earlier comment, and please don't fire me from the R Weekly Highlights podcast, but if I could speak it into existence, it would be pretty cool to have something like this that could service both R and Python packages. If we think of, we're doing a lot of work building both types of packages for the same sort of function. If you think about what Posit's doing with like both GT and Great Tables, it's pretty much the same functionality, just serving both user bases. And we've been doing a lot of the same lately, and to have sort of one place where maybe the binaries are already built as well to install those things would be pretty cool. That's why I was thinking multiverse might be multilingual, but we'll see. Just throwing that out there.
Yeah, who knows? We'll take it. And admittedly, I may have stepped into it a bit on Mastodon a little bit when I couldn't resist taking the bait from Bruno Rodriguez when he was talking about his disdain for managing Python dependencies and educational projects. And I had a rather snarky comment about this is one of the reasons why I try to avoid Python is going through those nightmares. But hey, you know what? They could learn a thing or two from our universe. I'm just saying, because I don't see anything like this with PyPy or anything of that sort. But I think a lot of people, you and me included, I do a little share of Python on the side here and there, would love to have this kind of curated resource for multiple languages. I think, who knows? Maybe you heard it here first. Maybe we'll look back on this a few years later and we'll say, hey, we're the ones that spoke it in existence. Who knows?
We can hope.
Well, Mike, as usual, you kind of have a crystal ball. We were talking about multi-language type situations. Well, I think our next highlight is very much about a new product, an IDE, that is very much trying to be a multilingual data science IDE powered by the latest innovations in software engineering. And we are speaking about Posit's new IDE called Positron, which had its beta earlier this year. And then, of course, there was a huge focus in quite a few talks at the recent PositConf. But that, of course, Posit has made the RStudio IDE for many years, and it's got a lot of engineering behind it, a lot of commits, a lot of features behind that. So you as the user who may have been using RStudio for many years or even a few years, and you hear about Positron, you may be thinking, I wonder if it's time for me to take a serious look at this. Well, there have been a few posts that have addressed this, but the latest post I think has got some real nice insights here. This is coming to us from the Jumping Rivers blog, in particular offered by Theo Rowe, and the post is titled Positron versus RStudio. Is it time to switch? Now, of course, we always throw the caveats. This is certainly a subjective decision, but I like what this post is doing. It's kind of laying the facts down of what's currently available in between both environments and kind of comparing and contrasting different aspects of what you as an R programmer expect to see or have to utilize in IDEs of the past. So the first thing right off the bat we want to mention is that Positron is not solely focused on R. It also has support for Python and Julia, but also additional languages that want to come to play, so to speak. There are ways through its APIs under the hood for a new language to talk to its engine, so to speak. And we'll talk a little bit about how it does it with the R language in a little bit. But this has been built, unlike with RStudio, which, let's be frank here, is predominantly an R-based IDE with a little bit of Python here and there with Reticulate, but you don't need that with Positron. If you have Python available, if you have R available, Positron's going to pick it right up. And there have been many, many people, you included, Mike, who just mentioned you may be switching between the frameworks for a given project. In Positron, it's just a toggle in the upper right corner away from switching from an R environment, an R interpreter, to a Python interpreter. So that is already, I think, for those that are operating in multi-language projects, a huge win in the Positron favor. There are other things that you might have to get used to in Positron that maybe were kind of bolted on to RStudio later in the game, so to speak. Such one example is the command palette. If you use IDEs like Visual Studio Code before or Atom before that, you may be used to the command palette as a way to quickly bring up what looks like a little search box. You start typing a few keywords and it will autocomplete to a particular command based on what you're searching for, such as maybe adding a new Git commit or bringing up a new file, rendering a new app, or things like that. RStudio never came with a command palette until probably about a couple years ago or so. Now, there may be, those that might say it doesn't quite feel as native in RStudio as it does in Positron. But in Positron, you kind of have to get used to it because that's the way to really unlock most of the functionality in an IDE of a Positron, is to interrogate that command palette to get to what you need to run or what you need to open and things like that. So there are ways you can bind additional shortcuts to that, but it is something to get used to alongside the way that it handles settings. Those are a bit different too. RStudio, there was a way to find them in a config file in your home directory or somewhere else. Positron is similar, but it's kind of agnostic to, you might say, the language being used inside. There are plugins or extensions based on languages from time to time, but it's basically a JSON file. You can get to it either using the interactive setting toggle in the editor or just editing that JSON file directly. You kind of choose your own adventure with that. It would trip people up in the RStudio world sometimes to figure out exactly where that file is stored and trying to edit it outside of like the GUI elements of the settings. So that might be advantageous to you if you want to really customize your experience with Positron, but do it through like a file-based way. Other things to watch out for, or that may be a benefit to you depending on your perspective, is that in Positron, you're not necessarily going to have to spin up what are called those R project files, or the files starting in or ending in .rproj. RStudio used that extensively for things like setting up a Git repository in a project, setting up a package, other uses like that. In Positron, it's just the folder. You can have what's called a workspace set of settings in that folder, which basically are a way to customize settings per folder if you wish. but you're not going to need that .rproj file to tell Positron that you're working in an R project when you work with that. There have been some people that really like that file, and there have been an equal number of people that really don't like that file in their repo. So that might be helpful to you if you've, had some angst on that in the past that Positron is kind of doing away with, because again, they're building upon an open source clone of Visual Studio Code. They're piggybacking off of another effort with a lot of tooling on top of it, whereas RStudio was built literally from the ground up to be a first-class R-based data science editor. A couple other things I'll mention before I turn it over to Mike here is that the layout will look a bit different. I've been used to the layout in Positron because it does have a lot of similarities to the Visual Studio Code layout that I've been using in a lot of my open source projects, but you will often see in a default layout in Positron, the file pane is on the left, and this file pane has a lot more going for it than I think the one in RStudio does, and I don't think I'm upsetting people when I say that. There's a lot more you can do in the file pane in Positron versus what you could do in the RStudio file pane, such as even just expanding folders with like the toggles to expand the nesting or whatnot. Little things like this can add up for a bigger project. Trust me on that. But then you also see on the left side your extensions in another tab, your Git integrated Git console in the other tab. There are people that like the Visual Studio Code or the Positron way of doing Git versus the way RStudio does Git. Your results may vary depending on where you fall on that fence, but it's all right there. There isn't anything special you have to do for it. It'll pick up Git right away. But with that, there might be some things that aren't as intuitive in the beginning. You just have to play with it a bit. But with the extension ecosystem, you can supercharge your Git experience with extensions like Git Graph. There are other ones called Git Lens that can really do some slick things for your command palette and Git operations. There's a lot going on here. The other thing I'll comment on that I think is something you want to look into is the Data Explorer in Positron, which is something that Visual Studio Code does not have. This is something new that Posit created in this version of Positron. You get a much more richer experience for when you're looking at your data frames to sort the columns by multiple columns if you wish. The filters are going to be much more intuitive to work with because they're going to be across the top of your data frame and instead of above the actual column itself. So that way you can navigate them much more quickly. And it can handle larger data sets without, causing your IDE to wait like 5 or 10 seconds to load the snapshot of rows. So there's a lot of engineering behind that I've heard from the previous talk, so it might be worth a look. If you really find yourself using that data viewer in RStudio a lot, I think the Positron Data Explorer is something you really want to take a look at. There are some things to be aware of that just aren't going to feel as native right now, such as the use of add-ins that RStudio used to kind of give you that additional functionality in the editor without building it into the editor itself. I'm hearing there isn't like a direct one-to-one to use those just yet. Although it makes me wonder, because with the R extension to Visual Studio Code that I used for many years, there were features that were added to that extension a couple of years ago to leverage add-ins in Visual Studio Code. So I know it's possible, but we'll have to see if Positron adopts that, or Posit adopts that for Positron in the future. So with that, any additional functions that use that RStudio API package that was often used on the back end of RStudio itself to kind of interrogate features of the IDE, that's not going to work well either. And R Markdown, you can do R Markdown in Positron, but it won't feel quite as native as it will in the RStudio IDE. But if you moved on to Quartal, that may not be an issue for you, because Quartal, however, has very first-class support in Positron. So the question might be, have I switched? I am not fully switched yet, and I'm not saying that because I'm using RStudio a lot. It's because I'm still using Visual Studio Code a lot because I have so many workflows that are built upon it. However, now that Bruno and company have figured out a way to get Positron installed on Nix systems. Yes, I have Positron on my Nix system, so I am trying to use it. I'm trying to adapt my Visual Studio Code workflows into that. Mostly going well. The thing I miss the most is the dev container stuff. I live off the dev container feature that Visual Studio Code has. Unfortunately, there's no easy way to get that into Positron because that's a Microsoft specific extension. It's not an open source extension. That's another thing to keep in mind. There may be a few extensions in Visual Studio Code that do not work in Positron because it's using the open source extension registry, not the Microsoft specific one. So with those caveats in mind, I think it has tremendous potential. It is still in beta, so your results may vary depending on the project you like or you're trying to use with it, but the foundation is there to carry out Positron, to really carry out its vision to being a first-class multilingual environment. So I'll be watching it closely, and I'll see where it breaks and share when it does.
I'm going to continue to watch it too, Eric. I have not made the jump yet, and I need to. I need to start exploring it a little bit more. I am very locked into VS Code and dev containers, and I guess I'm going to blame you as opposed to myself. I'm going to deflect here and say that you were the one that started me out down that journey that has locked me into that tooling for right now. I'm just kidding. It's hugely helpful. But the command palette, we should talk about the fact that Positron so closely mimics Visual Studio Code. And I think for a huge proportion of data scientists out there that are more comfortable in probably RStudio than in a more developer type environment like VS Code, Positron is a perfect bridge between those two things, in my opinion. I think it starts to bring in some of the best elements from something like a VS Code or like a full stack developer platform into an environment that RStudio native users might be a little bit more familiar with. The command palette being one of them. I know that there was a command palette that existed and exists now in RStudio, as you mentioned, for the last couple of years, but it's not quite as obvious, if you will, as the command palette that exists in Positron. That's sort of, a little bit more obviously put in front of you and drives a lot of the functionality of the IDE itself. Another thing that I think is a benefit, and one thing that I love about VS Code as opposed to RStudio, to be able to sort of search all of the files in your project. There is a Find in Files button in RStudio underneath Edit, and it's handy. It works very, very well. It takes a couple clicks, or if you know the keyboard shortcut, you can get to it a little bit quicker. But there's a giant magnifying glass in the left-hand sidebar in Positron and VS Code that allows you to immediately do that. I think it's much quicker, and these differences are subtle because I think the functionality still exists in both places, but the UX is just a wee bit better in Positron than in RStudio. That I think that slight difference makes all the difference to some extent, if you will. I think a really interesting thing is the lack of a need for .rproj files or R projects. This is again sort of moving folks away from R specific workflows into slightly more developer specific workflows and understanding how to interact with working directories without running set working directory if you can help it, right? So I don't know how this impacts the here R package that was developed by RStudio and now Posit. I think it'll still work fine because it'll look at your working directory as well, and I think it'll create relative links to that. But I know that some of the functionality of the here package actually looked for that .rproj file, if I'm not mistaken, and sort of recursively searched to be able to find that, to figure out where the working directory was that needs to be set with respect to all the other files that you want to work with. So I'm not sure how that plays into this whole Positron IDE in the event that you have a lot of workflows that depend on here, and maybe it's a little less straightforward to create a new R project. Although I do see in a screenshot here under the workspaces R project section, it's very faint, but if my eyes aren't deceiving me, there's actually a button that says new project under R. So maybe that takes care of that for you. I know that you may not necessarily need to do that, but if you want to do that and you have a lot of workflows within your organization and your team that leverage our projects and all of the different functionality that comes along with that, and you want to continue to do so, it looks like the functionality is still there for you. So that's just something to watch out for as you move from RStudio to Positron, and sort of decide on which pieces of functionality in your current workflows you want to continue to leverage, and which you may want to change to evolve your team's practices, if it makes sense to do so. But I thought that this was a really nicely comprehensive blog. I do think that one of the strengths here that we're going to get is the vast ecosystem of extensions within that open VSX repository or community of extensions, whatever you want to call it. I know that there's a lot of RStudio add-ins, but I can pretty much definitively promise you that the number of extensions in the open VSX ecosystem probably is quite larger than that. One thing that I absolutely am envious of for the Positron users who are already using it, and something that'll probably push me over the edge here to start using it, is the data viewer. There is one in VS Code. It leaves a lot to be desired. Obviously,
nicely. I know.
Obviously, the data viewer in RStudio is great. It's geared towards data scientists and exploratory data analysis. But this is what we have in Positron is the RStudio data viewer on steroids, I would say. You have column level summaries, summary statistics, including missing values in the left-hand sidebar while you're viewing your data in the majority right side of the screen, as well as the filters that have all been applied that can easily be added to or removed through a click of a button kind of along this nav bar at the top. I think it's a fantastic UI. I think it's a really super powered data viewer compared to anything else that I've seen today. I have seen some products like this that are just standalone SaaS platform data viewers, if you will, but to have this in our IDE in the same place that we're doing our development work is really exciting. So excellent job by Jumping Rivers, I think, to summarize the trade-offs here and the benefits that we have from the Positron IDE. And I'd encourage anyone that hasn't had a chance to check it out yet, self included, to check it out as soon as you possibly can.
Yeah, I mean, certainly it's becoming easier to install, as I said, for even major geeks like me and others. Now we can install it on Nix. I have put it through the paces a little bit. I started theming it a little bit. You're right about that extension ecosystem. There is something for everything. And one of my favorite extensions that I was using in my live streams way back when, turns out it's available in the open source one. They call it Power Mode, where when I type, I get these nice little explosion sparks happening next to the words as I type, just to give it a little flair. And I was like, there's no way that one's on there. Oh, sure enough, it is. So I can replicate some of my live streaming experience in Positron that I had from my Shiny Dev Series stuff from a while back. I will also have links to a couple additional posts, some of which have been covered in highlights before. One of those was from Athanasia Molenko, and she talked about her experience of Positron. I hate to say it looks like that here package or project stuff isn't working as nicely in Positron as we're hoping for, according to her. So we'll have to see if that gets better over time. And as well as a post by Andrew Heiss, who also has used Positron a bit and gives his 2 cents on his favorite extensions and the customizations that he's done to make it, the experience more fit for his workflow. That's a key right here, right? Is that Positron is already giving you a lot of nice, out of the box configurations, but there's nothing that's locked, so to speak. You can tailor that to whatever you see fit. And with the power of the VS Code, open source code, I should say, foundation, you can do all sorts of things. You can get your Vim key bindings. You can do all sorts of interesting ways to make that your own experience. So I will admit, at the day job, we can't really use Positron yet because it's not part of the Posit Workbench Enterprise product just yet. They're obviously going to, Posit's not going to put that in until it's production ready. So I still have to wait a little bit for my work projects, but certainly for my open source stuff, I'm going to give it a go and report back on what breaks and hopefully what works even better. You know, Mike, we are in you might say now we're starting to get into the doldrums of winter, but our next highlight has a very interesting title to it because it speaks on a few different levels. This is talking about one of our keynotes that was given at the recent R-Pharma 2024 conference by Posit's CTO, Joe Cheng himself, on the new tooling that's coming to the R ecosystem with the realm of artificial intelligence and interacting with large language models. The talk was affectionately titled, "Summer is Coming, AI for R, Shiny, and Pharma." So we have talked about some of the new tooling already in previous highlights of this show when we spoke very highly about the Elmer package, which is a key focus of this talk, which is giving you in the R ecosystem a very robust, compliant way to call different LLMs, both in third-party services like ChatGPT or Claude or others, as well as self-hosted versions of it, as well as the accompanying package Shiny Chat, which gives you a way to bring that LLM kind of console experience into your Shiny applications and build upon Elmer to do that. This talk was a tour de force of a few different concepts, but I want to set a little bit of context here because first, I have shared on this show, I've been a skeptic as anybody about kind of how AI can be put in directions it shouldn't be put into. It can be almost nauseating seeing some of the fluff that's put out there on cough LinkedIn about some of the weird uses of it. But guess what? I wasn't alone in that skepticism. Joe Cheng himself was very skeptical of this. It took him a while to warm up to this. He had some epiphanies earlier in the year, and combined with, getting to know that the AI tooling as you see it, there's more than meets the eye, to steal the phrase from Transformers, because you can build on top of these services. And that wasn't something that came obvious to him right away. But this talk is first introducing, again, the aforementioned new tooling in R, the Elmer package and the Shiny Chat package, with the demonstration that was lifted from the PositConf talk he gave, where we have what's called the restaurant tipping Shiny app, where instead of the app developer having to build a whole bunch of sliders, select inputs, toggles to try and be proactive, so to speak, in what the user wants to do to explore the restaurant data, there's like a chat bot on the sidebar where the user can type in a key question like, what is the average tip rating for males in this year or whatever. That is a prompt going to an LLM to translate that prompt into a SQL query and update the Shiny app on the spot. That was an eye-opener for me when I first saw that. And then when Joe had mentioned that he was going to give this keynote at R-Pharma, he, had a quick call with me to ask, what can we do to make this a little more relatable to the life sciences folks? Because, we all love restaurant data, but this audience in particular, we can be pretty skeptical of things, let's put it that way. And we often have to be, right? It's a very high regulated industry. So I gave him a little seed of what if we take part of the Shiny app that we did for this R Consortium submissions working group, where we sent a traditional Shiny application with a few different summaries to our health regulators as a way to prove it out that we could send a Shiny app for a submission. There's a portion in that app, I'll have a link to it in the show notes, where we have a survival type plot of time to event, so to speak, And we had a couple of sliders and toggles that were built by the TEAL package to explore that data going into the plot. I thought, why not have that chatbot in this display? So Joe, to his credit, it only took him about a week to do this, but he spun up another demo for this presentation to take that Kaplan-Meier interactive visualization built with ggplot and put a chatbot in to the left of it so that we could ask similar questions on different partitions of the data, and the plot would update on the spot. New sample sizes, new distribution curves or survival curves. Amazing. This, to me, to be, putting my spin on this, is a very intriguing feature when we start looking at data reviews and hopefully finding ways to get to insights more quickly, but in a controlled way. When I say controlled way, that's another part that Joe emphasizes here, is that the way this is all built is a very intelligent yet diligently structured prompt that's going to the chat server or the LLM when the app is launched, so it has the context set correctly. Now, correctly may be a strong word here because nothing's ever absolutely perfect in this realm of LLMs, but it's trying to control the possibility to its best extent of the LLM giving complete nonsense to the result coming out and telling it to do a SQL type query that is going to be used to filter the data going into that plot, kind of a translation layer on top of it. The other key concept is that these packages are leveraging another functionality that you might need if the LLM can't do everything on its own. That's the concept of tool calling. Another eureka moment in my mind, where maybe in the example he gave in the talk, you ask an LLM what's the current weather in California. It may not be able to do that on its own because it kind of needs to have an interactive way to look up that weather at a given resource. So Joe's example was giving it access to an R function that calls an API for weather data, having the function be documented with a parameter like the city name or whatever have you. The LLM calls that function and then takes its result and gives it back to the user. But it's kind of like that assistant to the LLM to get the job done. That was the other aha moment to me, is that we don't necessarily have to be limited by just what the LLM can do on its own. We can augment it with other services, other ways that if you can code it up in an R function, you might be able to use it as this tool paradigm with what Elmer can do to call to these LLMs for you on your behalf. And then the last part of the talk was talking about some of the practical considerations, and there are quite a few. I think the parts that show me that he is still grounded in this, it's okay to say no, folks. If it's giving you results that don't make sense, it just may be time to move on to a different solution. But putting in use cases where the answer is not always so black and white, it may be more of a layer to get to a final answer where you have a little more flexibility, but also keeping a human in the loop, which again, in my industry, you better believe we better keep humans in the loop when we look at these results. There's still a lot of productivity gains to be had if you can harness this the right way. But again, a very realistic talk. Again, he's excited about the tooling, but he is being realistic too. This is not going to solve all the world's problems. It's not going to magically put our drugs on the market like half the time as it currently takes. But I think this can greatly help certain aspects of development, such as the way we produce either applications or produce our tooling to interpret this data, get us the insights more quickly. There was a really robust Q&A after the talk. I had the pleasure of moderating that. But then we'll also have linked another dedicated talk from our APAC track of our farmer, where Daniel Bove led a Q&A with Joe Chang himself, who actually called in later that night around midnight his time to join that call, just because he was so passionate about connecting with the Asia Pacific colleagues on it. And there's some great Q&A in that session too. So am I still skeptical? I won't lie. I'm still kind of skeptical of certain things. But what Joe gave me in this talk was a way to show that, like I said, there's more than meets the eye for how he can leverage these LLMs and the tooling in front of them to craft a solution that I think is more fit for purpose to your particular needs, and cut out all the noise you see in the various social media or other tech spheres.
No, I'm very aligned with you, Eric. I think that the way that Joe is approaching these concepts and the way that Posit in general is building this tooling out, I think is fantastic, and it aligns with sort of what I would hope for. I was quite skeptical, and then Eric, I know we were both at PositConf this past year, and I watched that keynote talk, that hour-long talk from Melissa Van Bussel on practical tips for using generative AI in your data science workflows, and it changed things for me a little bit. It was very applied. It was very geared toward the audience, and just to be honest, there were a lot of things that she had presented that I didn't know were possible, and I thought that I knew everything that there was to know about AI, and I thought that the cons outweighed the pros, but that talk in particular sort of brought the pros up to maybe as even with the cons, maybe if not more, and made me want to start to look into things a little bit more in this space, try some things out and tune out, like you said, maybe some of the LinkedIn narrative marketing hype BS that's out there right now. It seems like AI agents is all I'm hearing about these days. I don't even know what an AI agent is.
I don't really care to know either.
Agentic or whatever. But another mind-blowing thing, and hats off to you. Did a fantastic job moderating this talk. It's well worth your time if you're in the R or data science space and trying to make heads or tails of these LLMs. And I think that the tooling, again, that Joe and the team have put together for us is really, really cool. I mean, you can't watch it and say that it's not super cool or super interesting. Whether or not you want to leverage it is totally up to you and your use case. But some of the possibilities that we have here are really, really cool. And thinking about these large language models as maybe a step in the workflow and their ability to call another process like an additional API is really, really interesting, and work with them. I know that recently the OpenAI, if it can't find the answer to your question in its training data, I believe it can execute a Google search or a web-based search, and then sort of fairly quickly execute that search, process the results that are coming back, maybe just looking at the first few links and trying to crawl over them and leverage those as the context that it's using to try to answer your question, which is pretty incredible. I know that just as a tangent here, while we're sort of still on the AI topic, the Sora model was released from OpenAI yesterday, I believe, which was a long time coming, and that is supposed to be text to video. So check that out. I would recommend, even if you're a skeptic and you're really, really against this stuff, I think it's worth watching just to educate yourself and understand what the art of the possible is, because the art of the possible is changing every day. And we're trying to do a lot of thinking at Catchbrook about how we are going to integrate these into the shiny apps that we develop for our clients in a way that makes the most sense, isn't going to just involve our team going crazy with all of this stuff to the point where we're just strapped for resources because everybody wants this. We're really trying to work hand in hand with our clients to figure out how and where it makes the most sense to leverage this type of technology. So the videos like this and the tutorials that really take a practical approach and hands-on demonstration about how to go about injecting this functionality into your Shiny apps are invaluable for us. So a big thank you to you, Eric, and Joe, for all of the time and effort that you've put into trying to do that for those of us on the ground.
Oh, well, he did all the hard work. I'm just like, are you kidding me? Is that even possible? I mean, it is amazing to see what we can do. And honestly, yeah, I definitely had almost like a closed eye perspective on this. I got, you might say, perturbed too much by all the noise out there before really giving it a fair shake. But like you said, we were sitting next to each other at PositConf. That was step one. And then step two was this talk, because now it wasn't just a quote unquote, fun toy example. Now it's like, okay, what can we do in life sciences that will open some eyes? And there are certainly other areas we're pursuing too. It's not just quote unquote the interactive data reviewing. There are many other realms of automation that we want to use to make the mundane done more quickly, and hopefully find advancements in training these models or giving it the prompt to train itself kind of on the fly. But that there is another part of that talk that you all should see. Again, being realistic here, there's some areas that surprised them as well at Posit, such as when they tried to use LLMs to help ingest their documentation, their technical documentation, and then putting like maybe a bot in front of that. They had very mixed results on that, which kind of surprised them, right? Because technical documentation, that's literally the source right there, right? You would think an LLM can ingest that and then immediately when they get a question about it, be able to surface that more effectively. And I know others are looking into that as well. I thought about that area for some of my internal documentation because I write a great website on using R and HPC environments. It'd be great to have a little bot next to it that people can type their question on, and it's going to use that doc to kind of help point them in the right direction without always emailing yours truly when something goes crazy. Not that I don't like helping people, but there's a balance. There's a balance there. So I'm intrigued to see where that goes for sure.
Me too. Yep. No, boundaries are important.
There are no boundaries, so to speak, when you see just the breadth of what's possible in this ecosystem these days. And I dare say the R Weekly issue, not to sound biased here, but I think we got to build something for everybody here and all the full gamut of new packages. And there's a good chunk of them in this issue. I wasn't shy about putting all these great new packages in here, as well as updated packages, some really interesting tutorials. So we'll take a couple of minutes for our additional finds here. And it's December. If you like music and you're on social media, you undoubtedly see the Spotify Wrapped posts that often people are showing about their favorite tracks that they've listened to in 2024. It's always an entertaining thing to look at. Well, Andrew Heiss, we mentioned him earlier, kind of took matters in his own hands because he doesn't listen to Spotify, and frankly, neither do I. But he listens to Apple Music. So he has this great post called Apple Music Wrapped with R, and he leveraged a way of exporting out the metadata associated with his listens from Apple Music and iTunes, because there's some somewhat interesting XML-based files that you can grep from this. Built some code via tidyverse type packages to process that XML data with a little bit of intelligent time lapse, summarizations. And he was able to derive basically those key metrics that we often see in the Spotify Wrapped, and, got some interesting results on what he's listening to. And to the surprise of no one, potentially, I don't know Andrew personally, but apparently Taylor Swift is in his top tracks to listen to, which I think many in the world would have that same thing. This inspired me, and not just on first Andrew's, as usual. Don't know how he finds the time to do all this, and plus he wrangles some gnarly XML to make it happen. But I've recently spun up some really intricate self-hosted version of my music listening. I took a day during my break for Thanksgiving, and I ended up ripping a whole bunch of my CDs that I bought when I was a teenager, music CDs, onto my beefy little server here in the basement, because I thought these CDs aren't going to last forever. I might as well rip them up and put them on MP3s or FLACs, I should say, on my server. But then I thought, well, it's great that I have these files. That's no way to listen to it. There's got to be a better way to have like a Spotify-like experience. So I found this program called Navidrome, which basically I can put in a Docker Compose in my Docker container, serve up the MP3s from a directory, finds the album art, finds the metadata for the artist and the track and whatnot, and I can basically listen to my songs either in the web player, which doesn't look like much to shout about, but it's an API under the hood, much like our universe has an API under the hood. And if you heard about a framework called Subsonic, if you have a subsonic compliant player, you can basically tap into that service and put it on your phone, put it on your computer, whatever have you. So that's great. But then I thought, well, it's not really keeping track of what I'm listening to. Sure enough, it has a plugin for that too, combined with another project called Molaja. Don't ask me how they name these things, but it basically gives me a way to track every time I play a song. But I keep that data in-house, folks. I ain't going to Spotify. They ain't going to, what's it called, Last FM or anything. So next year, I'm going to speak this in existence. And Mike, you're my accountability buddy here. I'm going to make a version of Spotify Wrapped, but completely self-hosted with my geeky taste in music. So you heard it here first. So Andrew, thanks a lot. You may have just nerd-sniped me into another project. How do you top that? I have no idea.
I don't know. And if for the folks that have listened long enough or know us, there's nothing more we love than music and nerding out. And when you can combine the two of those, it's bad news for everybody else. But that's a great find. I want to call out a blog from for any of the cinephiles out there, a blog from Mark H. White II, who is a PhD, and it is about predicting Best Picture at the 2025 Academy Awards. He's updating this weekly with his predictions on the win probability that he's seeing based upon the sort of critical reviews that are posted online. And it looks like The Brutalist is just ahead of Wicked in the ranking of which movie is most likely to win Best Picture at the 2025 Academy Awards. So really, really neat little blog post, a nice little interactive visualization here at the top of it. And check in each week on the blog to see who's winning.
That's awesome. Yeah, I know a lot of people like to do those predictions, and it's always, somewhat fun, sometimes scary trying to predict what ends up being a very subjective voting, as the Oscars are or Academy Awards are. So, yeah, I'll be interested to see how that shakes out. And like you said, very interactive, Plotly visualization. Plotly, another package I should give thanks to Carson Sievert every time I see him for this, because I use it in all my apps usually for Shiny. But there are other ones too, as we all know. We can't say Plotly without giving good kudos to eCharts from our good friend John Cohen. So we're fair and balanced here on this podcast.
Fair and balanced, and I will extend an olive branch as well to Kelly Bodwin, who wrote a fantastic article on her adventures with Advent of Code using data.table solutions.
That was awesome. I'd love to see that. And I even saw, this wasn't necessarily ours specific, on Blue Sky, a post about somebody using DuckDB to do the Advent of Code. Yes, DuckDB with SQL queries, and it's special. I don't know how all of you are able to do this. I was actually talking to a few people earlier today about it. Someday I will do Advent of Code, but my goodness, I feel like I'm so far behind. It's almost like imposter syndrome just thinking about it. So I love living vicariously through Kelly and others as they do this.
I feel you as well. Someday we'll get there, Eric.
Yeah, we can be accountability buddies on that one too. But what we are accountable for, hopefully, is sharing, what we find so exciting about the R Weekly project and this particular issue. But of course, you can find this and all the other issues at rweekly.org, as well as how you can give back to the project. And the best way to give back is to share that great resource you found, or maybe you created that great new package and you want the R community to know about it. We are a pull request away. To use the GitHub language, you just find that little pull request AutoCAD icon in the upper right corner. You'll be taken directly to the template. You can fill out a pull request right there. We got nice little template text to navigate which sections your resource should go in. But again, that curator for that week will be able to merge that into the upcoming issue. And we love it when we get your contributions. It's always a smile to my face whenever I get the curation and I don't see a 0 for pull requests. This is one time I want the pull requests versus other times you're dreading it. Not that I would know anything about that. Nonetheless, other ways to get in touch is with us specifically. We have a contact page that you can find in the episode show notes. You can send us a quick note there. Also, you can send us a fun little boost in Podverse or Fountain or Cast-O-Matic if you're on a modern podcast app. We have details for that in the show notes as well. And we are on these social medias when we're not being drowned out by AI noise that you might see on various spheres. You can find me on Mastodon, where I'm at our podcast at podcastindex.social. I am now more recently on Blue Sky, where I am at our podcast.bsky.social. That's a little addendum I should make. I have seen people put custom domains on that, and I need to figure out how they do that. I may be tempted to do that in the future. But nonetheless, that's where you can find me currently. And I'm also on LinkedIn. Just search my name, and you'll find me there. And I promise I won't send out garbage posts about AI on there. But Mike, where can the listeners find you?
You can find me on Mastodon at Mike_Thomas at fostodon.org. You can also find me on Blue Sky at Mike-Thomas at .bsky.social, or on LinkedIn if you search Ketchbrook Analytics, KETCHBROOK. You can find out what I'm up to.
Excellent, excellent. Always great to see what you're up to. And, I consider it a badge of honor that I tune you in onto the Dev Container route. I have no regrets about that in the least, buddy.
I am so grateful for it.
Yes, if I can get my day job to do more of that. But let's end on a positive note. This was a great episode, I dare say. And we hope that you enjoy listening from wherever you are. Again, we love to hear from you, especially as the year wraps up. It's always great to hear how your year has been in the R community and your journey with R and data science. We always love hearing your stories. That'll put a wrap on episode 189. That means we're 11 away from 200, and one way or another, we'll get there. But we will be back with another episode of our Weekly Highlights next week.